Welcome back, episode 10 of Revisited. 11.
You keep track of these stuff. Why are you looking at me? Oh my goodness! You keep track of this stuff. You edit it.
I'm also
everything.
sick. I'm also very, very sick.
That makes
Right.
that's an excuse.
NyQuil is a monster.
Yeah, you went to sleep at a little after 9, and you woke up at like 8. I'm like, oh my goodness, he's out. I wish I could do that.
Take NyQuil. Become like M, just depending on sleep medication. So, we really didn't know what we wanted to do, and whenever we don't know what we want to do, it always circles back to part 5. And seeing as this is the 10th question mark video, why not go back to the dude we started with, Oceaniz?
We're not picking on him. He's just very fun to talk about.
It'd be easier for people to make an argument that we're picking on Super Eye Patch Wolf.
Absolutely, especially after this Hunter x Hunter epic that we're gonna go through.
So, this is a double feature. We're recording 2 at once, cause they're both kind of short as opposed to his other one we did, which was over an hour for him. So we're talking about, first we're going to be talking about the Gold Experience Requiem is in a Deus Ex Machina, and then we're going to go into the perfection of Giorno Giovanna. I heard just literally 2 seconds of the Giorno one, and I'm almost certain it's a goof, and I'm very much hoping it's a goof.
It's absolutely not. It's a 15-minute video.
Well, let's get started on the first one.
Deus Ex Machina. It's a term that you will often hear thrown around by many budding critics on the internet. It successfully entered even the most common analytical vocabulary, and even your friends at home might throw that word around. But, as with every cool-sounding term, it is often used incorrectly.
Pause. Character development and world building, how's that a cool sounding term? Those are actual critiques that you can have against something.
Yeah. Even if, somebody does something and it's outside of our protagonist thing, like Jiraiya fighting Pain. That's like world building stuff. You get some past stuff and blah, blah, blah. Yu going outside, going to the demon realm and all that. That's world building stuff. It's in the series. Like, world building is a very easy thing to see, and so is character development. How does this change our characters? Do they grow? Yeah. Do they regress? Even regression is a development. So I don't see how Deus Ex Machina is way easier to misuse.
Yeah.
Everything else, like, no.
Character development is a very... How far did this character develop? What did they go through? Are they static? Are they meant to be static? Something like that. World building. Look at something like Naruto, going back to Naruto. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between a village hidden in the leaves and a village hidden in the sand? We don't know. It's basically nothing.
One is in a forest, one is in a desert. Other than that, we don't know how their economy work. We don't know how any of this stuff works.
And I'm not asking for like, oh, the first Hokage was this dude and he did this and he put forward this order. But we don't know anything about these things because it was mentioned and briefly shown in the Chunin exam and first gone to in the Rescue Gata arc. And we just see it and it's just basically a town. So as opposed to something like One Piece where, hey, you get the whole history of the island. Doesn't really matter so much to the whole thing, like Zoe or Punk Hazard, where it's like, this is an elephant, here's the history of the elephant, and then you go back in time and you see some stuff there. But I'm not asking for everything, I'm asking for something. And I don't think that going world building is a term that's used incorrectly. It is a big word or whatever you said.
I think you're watching the wrong YouTubers if they can't even use world building correctly.
It's not all that uncommon for it to be tossed around at anything without any rhyme or reason or any real explanation. This includes one of my favorite stories of all time, which will be the topic of this video. But let's first determine what a Deus Ex Machina actually is. The term comes from ancient Greek and can be translated as God from the machine or God through machine. The term was coined by a convention of Greek theater. Actors playing the role of gods were usually brought onto the stage in a magical, divine manner with the help of trapdoors or cranes, in short, machines. This would often happen towards the end of an act, and the gods would generally use their divine power to solve whatever problem the story had run into. The use of this device is accredited to Euripides, a tragedian stage writer who utilized the Deus Ex Machina in over half of his plays, one even including...
Okay, Oceaniz, this is very interesting world building. But is it gonna matter in the scheme of is Gold Experience Requiem a Deus Ex
we don't.
Machina?
You need to trim this down a little bit. We don't need this dude. We don't. It looks like you're just trying to get past that 10 minute for that sweet ad revenue. But this is this. I don't care, and I'm not gonna remember this. And you make your point.
It's interesting to anybody that it's interesting to. Anybody that's not interested in this and just wants to know if Gold Experience Requiem is or is not interested in this. I am not interested in history. I have never been. It is a subject that eludes me.
Chariot carried by dragons being sent by the sun god to abduct the heroine of his play Medea into safety, ending the story. From this origin, the term evolved further and further until it received its modern, more commonly known definition. A plot device whereby a seemingly unsolvable problem in a story is suddenly and abruptly resolved by an unexpected and seemingly unlikely occurrence, typically so much so as to seem contrived. Its function can be to resolve an otherwise irresolvable plot situation, to surprise the audience, to bring the tale to a happy ending, or act as a comedic device.
That's literally Gold Experience Requiem. Mm-hmm. Dude, they could not beat Dia.
A seemingly unsolvable problem. Dia is a unsolvable problem. Got it. Suddenly and abruptly resolves by unexpected. Suddenly and abruptly resolves. Absolutely. He punched him a couple times and he's dead forever. It was half an episode, that fight. Unexpected and seemingly unlikely occurrence. They were just like stab yourself with the arrow, so they knew that something would happen, but just the exact thing that they needed to happen happened. Come on now. Mm-hmm. Contrived, absolutely. Wow. He has the exact counter, absolutely. And if you look at something like Chariot Requiem, he has like 9 abilities.
Yeah.
Come on now. Resolve an otherwise unresolvable plot situation. We already went through that. Surprise the audience.
Well, it's not so much a surprise because you see what happens with Chariot Requiem, so we can stop that one.
Bring the tale to a happy ending or act.
Absolutely, he took over the gang, and now he forever took over the gang.
And it's just, we cut after Sleeping Slaves, and he's the boss. How did he get there? We don't know. Or act as a comedian, like, doesn't matter. But it's looking like it's fitting all these things as argued by us, except for maybe like 2 things which could still be argued, but even still, come on.
Gold Experience Requiem is 80% of the definition of a Deus Ex Machina.
Whatever this definition is.
So, essentially, it's an overly convenient, unlikely, and unpredictable perfect solution to an unsolvable problem. It is a quick eureka.
A perfect solution, absolutely. The perfect counter to this dude, absolutely.
It is literally, this is my ability, and mine perfectly counters your ability.
Silver Chariot Requiem, that wasn't a perfect counter ability because
to anything
he got the arrow from him. So Requiems are not a perfect counter. It said that this isn't said anywhere in the series, but it said that that's exactly what the user needs in that moment. That's going to be your Requiem.
Just like Kira, he needed the kid to be alive again, so all of a sudden he can reverse time through a certain thing.
So it's absolutely perfect. There's no argument there.
Predictable perfect solution to an unsolvable problem. It is a quick eureka for the story that essentially solves everything. And while we can have an entirely different discussion about whether or not this device is inherently bad, I think it's fair to establish for this video today that using something like this haphazardly can be very detrimental to a story, as it brings a story to a sudden, contrived, and unsatisfying conclusion. So this is a device that has to be used with care, and often isn't. Now we have that out of the way, let's talk about why Gold Experience Requiem from Golden Wind is not a Deus Ex Machina.
Oh my goodness.
He's a man of music. Where is this song from? The Last of Us?
Gold Experience Requiem
tell
is,
you.
as you probably know, among the strongest stands in all of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Its appearance at the end of Part 5 is a highlight of the entire part, seen as one of the most iconic moments of that particular arc. It is also commonly labeled a Deus Ex Machina, an unfulfilling, sudden development that ends the story abruptly.
Fulfilling is in the eye of the beholder. So I'm not necessarily arguing against that part. Because, was unfulfilling part of the definition there?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, so you're already like implanting your own definition onto the actual definition.
And you already said we're gonna argue later if, and not in this video, if it's a good thing or a bad thing. So you just adding that.
Yeah,
Just to...
Deus Ex can be. It happened in Rick and Morty. It was just like, just take the Deus Ex and leave. It was for comedic effect, and it worked. That was a good thing there. Rick is a walking Deus Ex. He's literally just like, oh, you're choking me? Well, here's a defense mesh around my neck. Who cares? Like, and it's for comedic effect, and it works. The whole series is about it. It works. So it's not about being fulfilled or unfulfilled. It's just literally, is this a Deus Ex? And by your own definition that you spelled out, this is a Deus Ex Machina.
It is also commonly labeled a Deus Ex Machina, an unfulfilling, sudden development that ends the story abruptly. And on the surface, one can see how that idea would develop. GR happens and the story is immediately over and everything is pretty convenient. And there are specifically three core aspects of that moment that I believe lead to that sort of thinking. For one, the beetle arrow, which creates the stand, just magically flies over to Giorno, granting him the ability. Secondly, the ridiculously monstrous ability itself, and lastly, the abrupt and immediate end to the fight once GR appears. And all three of these can be seen as an indication of a Deus Ex Machina if observed without context. But within context, calling them or GR...
Context of the power. It is a perfect counter. He skips time and then he goes, no you didn't. He can also like turn a rock into a scorpion from millions of feet away. We don't know what exactly the power is. Absolutely a Deus Ex Machina because there's no struggle. It is such a convenient end. It's not like he had to sacrifice anything. There was nothing there other than you win now.
This is just like what we said earlier. If he had stabbed himself halfway through the series and then is working towards his stand evolving, like his powers are fluctuating or whatever, or he has this new ability and he doesn't know how to use it and he's trying to learn how to use it, that's not the power is perfectly countering, and at this exact moment that he stabs himself, he gets the perfect power to defeat the guy that was undefeatable.
That's the context. That's all. That's really all you need to say. You put that across the table from anybody going, this dude, there were 5 people around him. None of them had any ability to beat him. This dude stabs himself with an arrow, punches him a couple times, and then wins. Is this dude stabs himself with a pre-established arrow that grants him an unstoppable power and then wins. Is that a Deus Ex Machina? Most people are gonna be like, yeah, absolutely. What's the context here? I don't understand that.
Well, he'll explain it, hopefully.
Without context. But within context, calling them or GR as a whole a Deus Ex Machina just doesn't hold up. So,
it absolutely holds up.
100%. We went through the definition.
You literally
we broke it down piece by piece.
It absolutely holds up. You can argue against it, but it absolutely holds up. Maybe your argument is good enough to where you can go, yes, but my argument against it being a Deus Ex Machina also holds up. Sure, that's the core of a debate. 2 arguments that hold up, and you're trying to. It's a clashing ideology.
Exchanging of ideas.
But you can't just go, this doesn't hold up, because it absolutely does.
Absolutely.
This is what I do. Let's go through it one by one. The arrow flying over to Giorno on its own is probably the strongest case for Deus Ex Machina one can make here. It literally looks like divine intervention, it just magically flies over. But keep in mind, a Deus Ex Machina is partially defined by both its unpredictability and its unlikeliness. Usually, whatever Deus Ex Machina is, it does...
Partially. But what about the things that thing? If that had not happened, the story would be over. Dia would have had it. They wouldn't have had Gold Experience Requiem. Doesn't matter about the unpredictability or unlikeliness. It's the fact that it happened and it solves the story. You're gonna argue that, or you're gonna argue only the things that you can argue.
It's just like all the other ones where it's just like, yes, it's this. But what about, it's like when we were talking about Super Eye Patch Wolf's why you should watch Golden Wind, and it's like, yeah, we understand Dia's powers except this part, but we're gonna ignore that.
Yeah.
But what about that part?
Like you just taking two parts of the definition and just going, well, if you look at it from these points, it's not. But the argument isn't over yet, so let's see.
Usually, whatever Deus Ex Machina is, it doesn't have a precedent. And that doesn't really apply here. The arrows have, ever since their introduction in Part 4, shown a clear will of their own. What exactly
I thought he said that wasn't a Requiem arrow.
Exactly!
So you need to skip all that Part 4 talk. Because when people pointed out that was a Requiem arrow, you went, no, it's not the Requiem arrow, it's just an arrow.
It's the beetle that causes the Requiem, ... whatever.
So we don't have a precedent if we're going by your own video.
isn't clearly known, but Part
Okay,
5 implies
pause.
that the virus...
Isn't that unpredictable since it's unknown what it could do? Since it's unclear like you just said? Isn't it unlikely that, why didn't it choose Dia? Well, we don't know.
Literally
It's
don't even
unpredictable.
know.
It is unlikely.
Except fate.
Except fate. So we don't know. So what's the argument here?
clearly known, but Part 5 implies that the virus living on the tip of the arrows, yes, that's a thing, seeks to call life in an attempt to evolve it into its highest form. On a more general level, we can also say that the arrows are, much like rolling stones, guided by the hands of fate. And this is established...
Could it not be said that fate is a godlike entity? Just moving the arrow as it pleases?
Which is literally where Deus Ex Machina comes from. God's coming and resolving the story. You said this. You said it.
So he bends down to pick it up, and it just flies away. You go, that's not a Deus Ex Machina.
Which is literally what you showed the origins of.
And this is established even before Golden Wind starts. In Diamond Does Not Crash, Yoshihiro...
I thought that wasn't the Requiem.
So what's the difference between the Requiem arrow and this arrow? Is it just that the other one grants the ability to create a Requiem stand and all other things are matched? We don't know. So it's unpredictable what it can and cannot do.
Stand arrow just casually decides to pierce Kira mid-breakdown, granting him an additional ability, Bites the Dust. So the arrows gravitating towards those they deem worthy is already an established phenomenon before GR gets created. Alright, but how is Giorno worthy? Is that a Deus Ex Machina? Not really. While the exact criteria towards worthiness are not well known, like...
Okay.
So how do we know really? How do we know really?
Why is Dia not worthy? It was flying through the air and somebody just went, Mista, stab yourself with the arrow. Why was Mista not worthy?
Why was Trish not worthy?
Why only Gio?
Why wasn't Bruno's body not worthy? Like, why is he worthy?
We don't know, like you just said, so it's unpredictable what it can and cannot do.
Really. While the exact criteria towards worthiness are not well known, like everything about the arrows, it is often assumed that it requires a strong...
Oh, but we know that the beetle one is the only one that makes the Requiem, right? Well, we know that for sure. How do we know that? Because it did.
Known, like everything about the arrows, it is often assumed that it requires a strong will and resolve, even more so for the superior beetle arrow. And as we discussed,
superior? Based on what?
Based on what?
Literally, based on what?
And you say we don't know anything about the arrow. We know that it apparently goes towards people. It's got the virus. It creates stands. We know a lot about the arrow, but it's the unpredictable parts that are the problem. That you're just casually brushing over.
Bro. And as we discussed extensively just a few weeks ago, Giorno is a walking embodiment of resolve, so it's not far-fetched that he'd be worthy. A second object of ire is the ludicrous power.
Oh, we're just done.
Okay, so why was Kira worthy?
Why was Kira worthy? Why did that happen? It just moved towards him, but you just went, yeah, it's shown that it can, so it's fine. Where was his resolve?
Why was Kira worthy?
Why was Kira worthy? He was using it for nefarious purposes.
But, Dia isn't worthy.
Dia isn't worthy for some reason.
Because, the hands of fate want the good people, except Kira.
But I don't understand that. Because Dia, once they got to the Coliseum, he was doing everything that he can to get the arrow. That shows resolve. He was hiding. He was creating plans. He was taking them off one by one. That's a lot of resolve there. And for some reason, he's just not chosen. But the stand arrow, fate, whatever, saw all of Gio's journey and went, yeah, him. They somehow saw all of his journey from start to finish, all the time, and just went, he's the one that's worthy. Based upon what? My goodness.
Is the ludicrous power of GR. It retains the life-giver ability it had in its unawakened state and receives a pretty decent power boost. However, the main attraction of the stand is an all-new ability called Return to Zero. This power makes it so that the moment an action against Giorno comes into existence is also the moment in which that action is undone. Furthermore, it allows GR to erase any result from existence, for example erasing Diablo's death, thus causing the universe to glitch out and loop him dying forever.
Why?
Why?
Again, we said this would have been made so much better if all those times you were supposed to get hit, hurt, and die, it all went back to that. All that time he erased, all those times he was supposed to be hit and stuff, that's when that happened.
But his consciousness is just getting teleported all over the world in different points in time just for some reason. And in this point, when he's getting his liver taken out, he's already dead. So how did he die again? He died, somebody there died, and then he's awake there, feeling the liver being taken out and stuff. And then he dies again, and then he just gets hit by a truck, and then it just repeats and repeats and repeats. What does that have to do with
literally anything?
Literally anything.
And loop him dying forever. And at first glance, this is a really over-the-top and convenient power. However, if we take a closer look at it, this aspect too doesn't really support the idea of a Deus Ex Machina. Thanks to Polnareff, we get a look at a second Requiem stand, and indeed, it too possesses a ridiculous and unbeatable power.
Pause! It was beaten!
They beat it.
It was an unbeatable. No, it was literally beaten.
It was beaten.
Debunked. In seconds.
Dia literally just tripped it. And then Bruno obliterated it.
Dia went, okay, my soul orb is right there, so I just gotta damage it, and then he'll relinquish the arrow. And he did. So he got the arrow, and at that point, the Requiem was done. It wasn't unbeatable. It had a bunch of weird and dumb powers that just kept stacking on. It literally was not unbeatable.
And indeed, it too possesses a ridiculous and unbeatable power. What's more telling though is the fact that Chariot Requiem is an incomplete Requiem stand. Its user basically dies halfway through its birth, and without the power to control it, Chariot Requiem remains unfinished and unrefined.
But Polnareff's spirit was still there, and the stand is the spirit of the person, not the body. So who cares if his body died if his spirit was still living?
And do we know that it's an incomplete one? It's fully formed. People can see it. It's doing its abilities. It's not like it was affecting some people and not other ones. It's just that it wasn't able to be controlled. That's all it was. And if it was, what, you're going to point to D and just go, okay, now he's got a fox coming out of his nose? What?
Requiem remains unfinished and unrefined. And even in that state, it is one of the strongest abilities ever shown. So, after seeing that display, it would be reasonable to assume that any completed, fully awakened Requiem stand would not only be even more powerful, but nigh on invincible.
Okay, I would be fine if it was just super powerful. If it was doing that life stuff and those energy beams and all that crap, sure. But then it erases results, which is literally Dia's power.
So we just have to just go, okay, he just won.
He just won.
He has an unbeatable super strong power, and he just won.
If it was two unbeatable powers versus each other, Dia's skipping ability and Gold Experience Requiem doing all that bush, you could be like, okay, two unbeatable stands are fighting each other. Somebody has to be beat. But it's literally, I counter your power.
It's a hard counter. You can't do anything. Even though it's a super powerful power. Bites the Dust was beaten. Super powerful power, absolutely. But it was beaten. You could point to it and go, here's how it could be beaten. Boy without stand. And it was. Everything was beaten. How do you beat Gold Experience Requiem? We have 3 examples of Requiems. Oh, I don't. Bites the Dust wasn't really a Requiem. We're counting it. We have 3 examples. How do you beat GR?
Thus, the insane power of GR doesn't really exhibit the unpredictability of a typical Deus Ex Machina, as, considering the pre-existing information, you could have reasonably predicted the power it possesses to be monumental.
Yes, monumental power, absolutely. Not the complete counter to the power of the dude they couldn't beat. That's where it becomes a Deus Ex Machina. That's the ignoring you're doing. If you're just going, it became super strong and you're going to assume it's going to be super strong. Even if it gained 5 new abilities, that's fine. But it's a perfect counter to the main antagonist's power that they could not beat. Without that arrow, they could not beat him from what we saw.
Think around that, nothing. There's no effort there. You're granted a super powerful ability. Super Saiyan, you have to go Super Saiyan. Okay, that's fine. But then you still have to fight. All it took was, I'm going to punch you, and now your consciousness is dying forever. There's still stuff after the super powerful gain of the ability. That's the point he's just not getting. He's just like, well, we have an example of a super powerful ability being granted, and thus not Deus Ex. Done. No, what about the perfect counter? What about the fact that Dia couldn't do anything? That's not satisfying. That's complete. That's unexpected. That's the entire definition.
Oh, sounds like you're unfulfilled.
He predicted the power it possesses to be monumental. Being incredible, tide-changing abilities is kind of just the norm for Requiem stands. And that changing of the tides...
Pause! Within an episode and a half, they had beaten Silver Chariot Requiem. It wasn't tide changing. Within an episode and a half, Bites the Dust was beaten. It grants a super powerful ability. Why did Kira get 1 ability? And Silver Chariot got 8. None of them have to do with swords play. None of them have to do with speed. It's a completely new stand.
Why was Polnareff worthy?
Why was Polnareff worthy? The first time that he got stabbed, he dragged himself to that little house and he got stabbed and everything around him started falling. How does that counter Dia at that point? You would think that if the arrow stabs him, and that's what he needs at that point, he would need a way to fix himself, not a way to just pause, make everything around him go to sleep. But no matter what, how did he deem himself worthy when he got punched, cut in half, and then dragged himself to a building and then it just stabbed him? He was a lecherous, womanizing piece of bent on revenge for years, and now all of a sudden he's worthy of the arrow because he's studying it and he's And we're just done with the power because his whole argument is just there was a strong power before and now here's a strong power.
Yeah, we expected a strong power, so why is that a Deus Ex Machina?
That's so dumb.
It's disingenuous.
It absolutely is.
Last point I want to cover. Once GR appears, the fight is basically instantly over. We get a cool scene of Requiem explaining its power, muda muda, and then it's done. Definitely reminiscent of the convenient immediate endings Deus Ex Machina offered to Greek theaters. But again, this approach crumbles when put into proper context. The only way to think that the ending to this fight is sudden is to assume that the final fight only starts when Giorno faces Diavolo.
No, you're again being disingenuous. Once GER appears, it's over. Who cares about the context of all those Greek guys from before with the plays and stuff when everything was leading up to that moment that the god appears? After the god appears, it's resolved instantly. After GER appears, it is resolved instantly.
That's the moment that it becomes a Deus Ex Machina. No matter what comes before it, doesn't matter. That's the moment that it happens. Of course, we know it's the whole final fight as soon as they enter the Coliseum. Doesn't matter. That point. Because you could just look at any play and just go, oh, the god just stepped in. Well, what about the entire play? It wasn't a Deus Ex Machina because we had the entire play for context. No.
What happened after the god stepped in? Oh, it was resolved instantly.
Oh.
So what happened when GER appeared? Oh, it resolved instantly. But it's not a Deus Ex.
But it's not.
Because that's not actually the final fight.
The whole final fight is the Coliseum.
No. After he appears, what happens?
It is instantly over. That's all you need to say.
This is an assumption that's clearly based around the typical final fight formula where the concluding clash only begins when the main character goes one-on-one with the big bad.
No,
but this simply isn't
absolutely not. There's plenty of times where it's just like it's a group fight. That it doesn't matter if it's just a one-on-one sort of thing. The part 4 one, it was a one-on-one and then another one-on-one and then a group fight. It doesn't have to be. The one-on-one in part 6 was a one-panel stomp down.
Yeah, that was a raffle.
It does not need to be a one-on-one fight in order for us to be like, okay, now we start looking for the Deus Ex Machina stuff. No, it happened because they're all standing around, and if you look back at this episode, while they're talking and stuff, and Dia's like, aha, I've won and stuff like that, you just see Misa just slowly reloading his gun, like maybe I can cap him. You got fighters here who have the ability to fight, but they're just not. For some reason.
big bad. But this simply isn't applicable to JoJo. More often than not, a final fight won't be a 1v1, but rather a chase. Part 2's runaway sequence from Cars, or the desperate struggle against Bites the Dust in Part 4 are good examples of that. And that's exactly...
No, they stood there. Kira and Josuke stood 17 meters away from each other fighting.
He's only putting what makes his argument. He's not putting the volcano fight. He's not putting Dio versus Jonathan where they're just standing looking at each other and fighting. He's not putting Dio versus Jotaro. He's not looking at part 6 where they're just in a circle going, how do we beat this dude? He's only going for what makes his point. Because half of that was a chase. It wasn't a chase. They were standing around and the kid went to them. My goodness.
the case here. Giorno versus Diavolo isn't the final fight, at least not all of it. Rather, the final fight...
Okay, but who cares? Let's say with those Greek plays, one person is fighting two people. And they're fighting hard and hard, but they're getting hit, and they're slowly getting killed. And then the god comes down and strikes down the two people. Who cares? Who cares that the person was fighting hard in the chase and all that stuff when the god comes down and just strikes it and resolves the story for the happy ending? That's the problem. That's the Deus Ex. They had no way to beat Diavolo.
Look at part 2, the volcano. Absolutely not a Deus Ex Machina. Pure luck. He had not planned that. There was nothing there. He just went. And freaking cards went, you planned this, didn't you? You're like, yeah, sure did. As he floated away, just going, well, I guess I'm dead as well. There was no plan there. He just went, I'm just going to try a buttload of things and something may work. Volcanoes erupt. Makes sense. Stan Arrow grants unbeatable power. Makes sense. Perfect counter? Doesn't make sense. Because at that point, at any point in time, you just go, grab an arrow, stab yourself, win instantly. That's all you need. It ruins the story.
Of it. Rather, the final fight starts with the birth of Chariot Requiem. The entire chase.
Okay, who cares? If a play is 30 minutes of a final fight, and then in the final 2 minutes, the god comes and resolves the fight, and then the happy ending is 40 seconds. The Deus Ex is still happening. The god just resolved this unbeatable fight. This unwinnable fight for the protagonist.
It doesn't matter the time that the fight took place. It matters what happened. And what happened, they could not beat Dia. Point blank period. And then they got a way to beat Dia. Point blank period. And then it beat Dia easily. Point blank period.
Arrow is the final confrontation, not just the final 1v1 fight. And while, yes, the fight ends very quickly after GR is born, that's kinda what was at stake throughout this entire arc. We are told again and again that he who holds the arrow will be invincible and win, and GR's insane ability and the ease with which it disposes of Diavolo.
Did Polnareff win?
But his wasn't incomplete there because of blah, blah,
What
blah,
other abilities could it have? It had 8 abilities. What else could it possibly do?
Again, if it was just overpowering him with power, that would be different. But it's not. It is literally a counter to the antagonist's power. That's the difference. If you expect a very powerful thing, that's fine. If GR had a bunch of abilities that weren't that, that's fine.
And now he has to figure them out as he's fighting and figure out how do they work in relation to this time skipping that have been great. Anything other than get arrow, stab, punch, dead.
Perfect counter. Perfect counter.
Is essentially the payoff to that build-up. Having GR struggle after it receives its ability would have undermined that sort of build-up. The entire point of the Requiem arc was that the arrow is this object of...
The struggle doesn't need to be that Dia even stands a chance. The struggle could be that Geo is figuring out his powers as he's beating Dia. So Dia is still doing all his stuff. And then GR gets punched or whatever, and Geo gets stabbed, let's say he gets the king punch or whatever through his chest, and then it's just instantly healed, and he's just like, I don't know what the happened there.
Exactly. Or them just going, my abilities need for me to punch him. Get me close to him. And you got 3 people trying to figure out, how do I just get one punch in? Anything other than, boom. I literally cannot think of anything worse that could have happened. Because it is a hard counter. Even Jotaro had to go, I had to figure this out. I have to, as he's ending his stop time, I have to stop time. I have to at least think about this. And then I have to hit him in the exact weak spot that was hit before. His messed up leg. I have to hit the stand, not him, because he can regenerate. If I hit the stand breaks apart, he dies. Makes a lot of sense other than just punch. That's the entire thing.
Power that has to be gained in order for the story to conclude. In conclusion, I think that looking at these 3 aspects of GR, it is pretty evident that it's not really a Deus Ex Machina.
Sure
Not
isn't.
really.
It operates based on established mechanics of its fictional universe and its birth and strength.
Yeah, the Greek god stories had gods in them. We know there's gods in there. But when they come down and strike down the villains and then it's over, people went, wow, Deus Ex Machina. So when the god
Good point.
So when we know Requiem stands exist, so when it comes down and strikes down the antagonist that they could not beat, we go, wow, Deus Ex Machina. But not really.
multiple times during the preceding events. But
Doesn't matter if it's foreshadowed. Super Saiyan is foreshadowed. Not a Deus Ex Machina. I'm trying to think of what is a Deus Ex Machina other than this.
It would be like if Luffy, if his awakened devil fruit ability was a perfect counter to everything Blackbeard did.
But it would be like the exact same thing that happens in part 5.
It's literally what happens in part.
Dude.
Contracts and Hunter x Hunter sound very Deus Ex bush. Because we don't even understand how that crap works. So Gon just getting the power to beat Pito is just like, where did that come from? But because contracts are an established thing from before, who are the contract? You know what? This is a Hunter x Hunter video.
But still, there's questions to be asked here.
And as we discussed just a few weeks ago, GR is a thematic conclusion to Giorno's journey.
Oh my goodness.
I don't want to repeat myself too much, you should really go watch that video, but in essence, Giorno's story is all about the resolve to move forward, to both accept yet oppose fate and to influence reality by actions born of truth. And at the end of his trials, he's rewarded with the ultimate instrument of fate, Gold Experience Requiem. Thank you all for watching.
Can we go back to the definition?
Sure thing, sir.
Because he just not even addressed so much of that. It's seemingly unsolvable. He didn't address that.
Yeah,
whatsoever.
you couldn't. They had no solution to how to beat him. And the story is suddenly and abruptly dissolved. Absolutely, it was suddenly and abruptly dissolved by.
Unless you look at the context of the fight starts once the gold silver chariot requiem comes, then it's not suddenly enough, but it is suddenly and abruptly resolved. Then
Unexpected and seemingly unlikely. You could argue both sides of that. Unexpected, because we see Requiems before, and we know that Requiems is going to be a super powerful stand. But unexpected, as far as the complete counter to the ability, that's the contrived bush. Its function can be resolved, and otherwise irreversible. Yes, unsolvable plot situation. We cannot beat him.
0% beat him, and then we're handed the ability to beat him. Surprise the audience? Not really.
I think it surprised the audience when it flew over to him.
Mm-hmm. To bring the tale to a happy ending. There was no happier ending that could have been happened at that point.
Unless everybody that died came back.
But outside of that, which would be even more bullcrap, everybody who was alive at that point stayed alive. Giorno got to be the boss. He now has an unbeatable stand. Trish and Mista are seemingly together. And he did not address anything other than the parts that he could argue against. This is
-9?
a -9.
If it was longer, it would have been worse.
Super, super disingenuous, and just it perfectly counters. That's all you need. One Piece, Luffy perfectly countered Inaru. On paper, that should be a done and dusted deal.
But it wasn't conveniently wrapped up. It wasn't quickly wrapped up. It was still a long, drawn-out fight. There is no reason that Luffy should lose. Oh, wait, no. I can read your strikes, so I can just dodge everything. Yeah, but I'm just going to punch the ship instead, so now you can't read it, because I don't even know where I'm punching. Well, here you go. I'm just going to make your arm a ball of gold and get you down there. You can't come back up here.
And now no one can beat me. That makes so much sense. The hero has a hard counter, and the villain goes, but no.
I'm gonna fight through this hard counter.
Gold can be melted. I'm gonna melt it, and now it's boom. It's hardened again. It's super heavy. Get the down there. Even if you stayed up here, guess what? I got this spear. You can be stabbed. So there's still a fight to be had there. But here, there's nothing that Dia could have done. If you look at something, going back to One Piece again, it is so lucky that Zoro got Mr. One. Because basically anybody else would have been dead. Luffy cannot beat Mr. One.
Nope.
That would have been a hard death. But it's lucky that the number one fought the number one, and
Yeah.
But not a Deus Ex Machina. It's just lucky. Even still, how does he beat him? Well, he wants to be the greatest swordsman. The greatest swordsman should at bare minimum be able to cut steel. And he does. This was a terrible video. This dude is he's very infuriating.
-9.
-9.
And now we've got one more.